Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 139. Castor stared at him for a long time, then suddenly laughed. Even Cassie giggled, entertained by Sonny's earnest delivery. Shaking his head, the handsome young man smiled and said, "I see your sense of humor did not change. Good, that is good. Few people manage to preserve it here." Sonny blinked a couple of times and said, pretending to be offended, "What do you mean, sense of humor? It's the honest truth." He received another bout of laughter instead of an answer. There was food, safety, and laughter, he thought suddenly, remembering how Cassie had described the bright castle after dreaming of it for the first time. She had also seen Sonny leading her through its gates. Her prophetic visions were turning out to be frighteningly accurate. Makes you wonder about that other vision she saw. Not allowing himself to become distracted, Sonny chased away the ominous feeling and hid a smile. Then, with a shrug, he scoffed. "Well, don't believe me if you don't want to. That was just one of my many adventures, anyway. Although the other ones were, admittedly, less remarkable, you know, the usual stuff, slaying dozens of awakened creatures, being resurrected from the doors of death by a beautiful princess, summoning ancient horrors from the depths of the cursed sea, outsmarting ancient fiends to escape from their clutches, sailing through the abyss on a boat made of demon bones, fighting gargantuan leviathans underwater, and so forth. Mundane crap like that." As he was talking, Cassie gradually stopped laughing and turned to him with a somewhat startled expression on her face. It seemed as though it was only now, with the harrowing journey already behind them, that she had finally realized how outlandish it all actually was. Put together, the facts of their bloody struggle to survive sounded like something out of a fairy tale. But they both knew that all of that had actually happened. It had happened to them. Castor chuckled. "Wow. Compared to you, Sonny, my own story sounds kind of lame. I just entered the dream realm near the city wall and spent a few days running away from a bunch of terrifying monsters, then stumbled on a hunting party from the castle, and that's pretty much it." He sighed. "By the way, when did you guys arrive? I'm sure I haven't seen you around before." There was no reason to lie, and Sonny couldn't anyway. Looking longingly at his monster stew, which was slowly growing cold, he sighed and said, "We reached the Dark City 2 days ago, and entered the castle yesterday at dusk." The handsome legacy stared at him, then blinked a couple of times. Wait. What do you mean? Did you guys really spend 2 months in the labyrinth?" Oh, finally, the moment he had been wary of came. Sonny really didn't want for anyone to think that he was some kind of a powerful figure. First of all, there was no better advantage than being underestimated by the enemy. Secondly, he still had to hide the fact that Changing Star had not been the only one to receive a true name in the first nightmare. Luckily, he had long thought of an exceptionally convincing excuse. When in trouble, blame everything on Nephi's. Laughing inwardly, Sonny pretended to shiver and sighed. "Yeah. I don't even want to think about it. That place. It's pure hell. Honestly, if it wasn't for Changing Star, both of us would have been long dead. She wouldn't have survived without his help, too." But Castor didn't need to know that. Sonny was pretty sure that mentioning Neff's name anywhere near the names of two losers like Cassie and him were believed to be would make anyone think that she had single-handedly carried the both of them to safety on her back. As it turns out, he was right. As soon as he mentioned Nephi's, something changed on Castor's face. With a strange look in his eyes, the handsome man leaned forward a little and asked in a deceptively calm tone, "Changing? Lady Nephi's is alive. She is here." He had already forgotten all about how unlikely it was for someone like Sonny to survive a long journey through the deadly nightmare of the labyrinth. Sonny narrowed his eyes slightly. Castor's reaction was a little bit more intense than he had anticipated. It was on the border of being weird, but then again, the tall and handsome legacy had seemed to be strangely enamored with Nephi's even back at the academy. "You bastard." Enraged for some unknown reason, Sonny gritted his teeth and said, "Yeah. She's around." Turning her head slightly in his direction, Cassie hesitated for a moment, and then added, We only had 2 soul shards when we came to the castle. So she is staying in the outer settlement. For now." Castor leaned back, a hint of disappointment appearing on his face for a fraction of a second. Then, he inhaled deeply and said, I see. Sonny took a sip of his tea and asked, "Why are you so interested in Nephi's all of a sudden?" The handsome young man looked at him with surprise. "What? Oh. I'm just glad to know that more of us survived." Then, he sighed and shook his head. From what I was able to learn, there were no more than 7 sleepers sent to the Forgotten Shore by the spell this year. Up until today, I thought that I was the only one to survive. It's good. It's good to know that I was wrong. Castor's face grew solemn. If Lady Nephi's was with you, that explains how you have managed to reach the Bright Castle alive. But the other 3. I'm afraid that they are long dead. May their souls rest in peace. Sunny and Cassie lowered their heads, coming to terms with this new information. It was true that they had not been treated well by the rest of the sleepers in the academy. Still, it was also somewhat heartbreaking to know that several of the kids they had known, even if it was just for a short amount of time, were now gone, killed by the vicious crucible of the dream realm. The cruel and ruthless nightmare spell had taken its first victims. Who would be next? Without having to look at each other, they quietly repeated Castor's words, "May their souls rest in peace." Chapter 140, True Legacy. Some time passed in silence, with each of them thinking about what their own fates would be in this cursed place. Finally, Sunny extricated himself from this dark reverie and asked, "So you've been here all this time? How are you able to afford to live in the castle? Don't tell me that you have joined this Golden Serpent's army." Castor sighed. No, I didn't. Although I'm going to lie if I say that I haven't been tempted to. One way or the other, all roads here lead to Gunlog and his men. I don't think there's more than a handful of powerful sleepers who have managed to remain independent. Currently, I'm one of them. Sunny stared at him and repeated his question, "How so?" The handsome young man shrugged. "My aspect ability gives me a certain advantage when it comes to escaping the clutches of the nightmare creatures. Not so much with killing them, though. I went on a few hunting expeditions with other independent hunters. But that was a mistake. We barely escaped alive. Still, it landed me a few soul shards. The rest I got from selling a couple of memories." Right. Unlike them normal people, the proud legacy had entered the dream realm with an entire arsenal of memories that his clan had prepared for him. He had also started with a somewhat considerable amount of soul essence already absorbed, although it wouldn't have been too much. Unlike memories, which could be brought back to the real world by anyone, actual soul shards were physical objects, and as such, only masters and saints were able to transport them, because they traveled between realms physically, and not just in spirit like sleepers and awakened. That meant that even rich legacy clans couldn't afford to feed too much soul essence to their scions in advance. Masters were a rare breed, after all, let alone saints. In any case, Castor had it better than anyone else on the Forgotten Shore. His ancestral memories were enough to buy him months, perhaps even years of a tranquil life in the castle. He could use this time to learn the ins and outs of the Dark City to become an independent hunter or reconsider his position and join Gunlog's host eventually. Even in this hell, his background gave him an enormous advantage. Lucky bastard, but that still didn't explain why those thugs were so unwilling to get on his bad side. Sunny frowned. "Why were Gunlog's men afraid of you?" Castor looked at him with irony. "Those two? Oh, right. You have just arrived at the castle. Well, basically, there are different kinds of people serving Gunlog. The guys you have so carelessly offended are members of the castle guard. They are at the bottom of the totem pole. They are also the weakest and have little to no real battle experience. What minor reputation I have is enough to make them think twice before messing with me." For a second, there was a dangerous gleam in his eyes. Because of Castor's amiable personality, when talking to him, it was easy to forget what the word legacy really meant. Legacies were trained to fight and kill since they could barely walk. Every one of them was a true powerhouse. Sunny had no doubt that Castor's actual reputation in the castle was not as negligible as he would have them believe. After all, he was the only human. No, actually, the only being Sunny knew of that had managed to defeat Nephi's in combat. And in terms of personal power, Nephi's was as high as one could get in Sunny's heart. No one else could even compare. He was also sure that Castor's reputation was earned by spilling blood. "I really hope that I won't have to face this guy in battle one day," Sunny thought, feeling a cold sensation that he desperately hoped was not a premonition. With a sigh, he tried to hide this unease and asked, "So I shouldn't be worried about their retaliation?" The amiable young man gave him a nod. "The two guards you have humiliated might try to do something on their own, but there won't be any reaction from the host itself. but I doubt that they will. Just don't antagonize them any further." He suddenly grew serious. "However, if they were hunters or, even worse, one of the Pathfinders, even my name would not have protected you. You'd simply be dead. So, please, watch your actions in the future. This castle, in a sense, it can be as dangerous as the city outside. Especially for someone with your temperament." "What's that supposed to mean?" Sonny wanted to bite back, but then closed his mouth. Yeah, he really did have a temperament that attracted trouble. Guilty as charged. While he was reconsidering his life choices, Cassie suddenly spoke in a quiet voice, "Castor, is there really no way out of here?" The proud legacy looked at her and remained silent for a long time, a somber expression finding its way to his face. His eyes were heavy and bleak. After a while, he sighed and said, "None that any of us can ever hope to reach, Kasha. As it is right now, this is where we have to live. Maybe something will change in the future. But for now, just take care of yourself and try to survive." Standing up, he glanced at them one last time and smiled. "It was so nice to see you, guys. Really. I'll leave you to your food now, if that's okay. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to come find me. My quarters are in the Tower of Dawn." Quarters? Of course that miscreant has quarters. With that, Castor left, letting Sonny finally get to his stew, which was barely warm by that point. Great. Breakfast is ruined, he thought angrily, drilling 2 holes in the tall sleeper's back. His fault. It's all his fault, not mine. Yeah, definitely. Some time later, Sonny was lying on his bed with his eyes closed. The Tower of Dusk was calm and quiet. It was time to send his shadow on a walk. Chapter 141, Golden Serpent. Other the next 5 days, Sonny mostly stayed in his room while his shadow stealthily prowled around the castle, spying on people and learning their secrets. Slowly, he began to understand the undercurrents that flowed beneath the seemingly peaceful surface of life in this pristine white fortress. Of course, in reality, things weren't peaceful at all, and as far from pure as one could imagine. But that was to be expected from a place where hundreds of lost youths lived with no hope of ever finding their way back home, away from all the restraints of civilization. He wasn't surprised at all. If anything, it was strange to see some semblance of law and order, no matter how detestable and revolting, persevere despite all the obstacles that stood in the way. Somehow, the inhabitants of the castle were able to coexist with each other in a fragile balance. The system was cleverly built in a way that allowed the abused to dream of a better life and restrained the abusers from going too far. Better life meant winning Gunlog's favor, while going too far meant losing it and being banished into the cold darkness of the outer settlement. Both fear and hope were created and firmly grasped by the Bright Lord. Their mere existence kept people in their places. Sonny suspected that the same dynamic, just substituted for a different kind of reality, reigned in the slum outside of the castle walls. The outer settlement seemed to exist separate from the castle, but in fact, both were simply parts of one large ecosystem. People on the outside longed to be allowed inside, while people on the inside dreaded being exiled to the outside. Because the possibility of a better life, or a worse one, existed, they were distracted from the fact that, no matter what happened, they would still be spinning in a circle. Like a serpent biting its own tail, the bright castle and the outer settlement created a closed cycle of exploitation and abuse that, paradoxically, kept everyone in the dark city sane and alive. It was nothing short of ingenious. Of course, Sonny wanted no part of it. He didn't know how many people were currently surviving in the slum, but there were somewhere around 500 sleepers living in the ancient stronghold. However, not all of them shared the same status. There was a complex hierarchy in place, separating people into different castes. Some of these groups had a distinct place in the hierarchy, while others were less clearly defined. Most of the inhabitants of the castle, unsurprisingly, were directly serving Gunlog. They were guards, hunters, pathfinders, artisans, and handmaidens. Ruling over them were 5 lieutenants who answered directly to the Lord himself, each responsible for their own aspect of the day-to-day life of the fortress. The castle guard was the largest of these groups, consisting of around 150 men. They were in charge of guarding the stronghold and enforcing Gunlog's laws. Just like Castor had said, they were near the bottom of the totem pole in terms of power and status. Anyone with a remotely useful aspect ability could join the guard, and although their training was rather rigorous, actual opportunities to experience combat were few and far between. That was not to say that their job was not dangerous. Every time a stray nightmare creature climbed the hill or attacked from above, it was their duty to either kill or chase the monster away. And out here in the Dark City, no monster was anything less than terrifying and absolutely deadly. The castle guard was led by a morose giant of a man named Tessai, who was one of Gunlog's most trusted lieutenants and perhaps the oldest sleeper on the Forgotten Shore. He was just 2 years short of 30. Tessai was a ferocious fighter and ruthless commander, holding his subordinates in an iron grip. Above the castle guard, there were hunters. These were the elites of Gunlog's forces, each possessing a powerful combat aspect, rich battle experience, and sharp wit to make use of both. There were around 50 of them, divided into 7 hunting parties. Each morning, as soon as the gates of the castle opened, one of the parties left the safety of the impregnable marble walls and ventured into the harrowing maze of the Dark City to hunt and kill awakened creatures. It was thanks to their efforts that people in the ancient stronghold had food on their plates. Without them, none of this would have been possible. Hunters were recruited from the ranks of guards, and becoming a hunter was a dream come true. That was because these professionals enjoyed plentiful rewards from the Lord, such as living in a room of their own as opposed to cramped barracks, better food and access to various luxury items, best memories and tools the bright castle could provide, as well as many other things. Of course, the other side of the coin was that their lives were often the shortest. Despite all their experience and preparations, many never returned from the hunts. And the only reason any did at all was the Pathfinders. Pathfinders served as guides for the hunting parties. Just as Effie had said, the secret to surviving in the Dark City was to find and kill comparatively weaker creatures without stumbling into something far more deadly. They made sure to do just that, track the awakened monsters without leading the pack of hunters into the jaws of fallen abominations. There were so few Pathfinders that Sunny even questioned whether they could be categorized as a group. In the whole castle, there were less than a dozen. Each of them was a seasoned veteran who earned his role through surviving long years of bloody battles in the ruins, and thus had a chance to live long enough to learn large areas of the Dark City like his own 5 fingers. Needless to say, all of them were incredibly fearsome combatants and enjoyed lavish, sometimes even decadent lifestyles. Both hunters and Pathfinders were led by a charismatic man called Gemma. Gemma came to the Forgotten Shore in the same year as Gunlog, and had helped him take control of the castle. Together, these 3 groups, guards, hunters, and Pathfinders, formed Gunlog's army, which was simply known as the Host.